And in other nostalgic toy-related news, Toys R Us is going into liquidation probably in the next week or two here in the United States, and this will also impact their international stores as well. This will be essentially the end of this iconic company, but the brand will live on in some way. Partly because the brand is one of the things that will be actually liquidated. People will want this very well-known brand name to be their own thing, and I think we'll probably see this exist in some way, shape, or form in the near future. Now, over the weekend, I took my daughters up to the Toys R Us that I used to shop at as a kid in Waterford, Connecticut. I believe this location was built in the mid to late 80s, and this is the store where I got that Sega Genesis back there, actually. It was really kind of funny because I was reading all of these new video game magazines that were coming out in the summer of 1989, and everybody was excited about the 16-bit revolution, and it was supposed to come out in like September, October or something, the Genesis there. But because I was in Connecticut, we were part of an early test market, so the Genesis actually came out earlier here. I think I got mine in like August of 1989, maybe even July. So it was a very early rollout for the Genesis at this store, and that is where I was able to get it after saving up my pennies. It was $189 back then. I picked up the Genesis console along with Space Harrier with the Altered Beast cartridge, of course, packed in with it. I also bought my first Game Boy there. And one of the cool things about Toys R Us back then is that they really had the biggest selection of video games you could find anywhere. When you walked into that store, they had a huge long aisle, maybe even two. I'm talking like the whole length, or at least a good chunk of the length of the store, of just the games. They had these little tags that were hung up, and they'd have these little tickets beneath it that you could pick the ticket out and take it up front to the register, pay, and then go to the lockup at the front to get your game or console as you left. In fact, now that I think about it, I also bought my original Nintendo, 8-bit Nintendo there as well. And it was such a fun place to go because, again, you just did not have that selection anywhere else. This is one of the few places that I could actually buy a Sega Master System game at, for example, because most of my local department stores didn't carry any video games or just carried the most popular titles. Toys R Us had just about everything, and they had quite a selection. But nowadays, the store doesn't remind me of how it used to be. In fact, they carved up a good chunk of the store for baby stuff because that stuff is more profitable. Things like cribs and formula and diapers and that sort of thing. So they've really reduced the footprint for toys to the point where it didn't seem like there was a lot of selection there. And this store was not in liquidation yet. This is just their regular course of business. And even my daughter just did not appreciate the selection they had at that store. I think she got more out of the Walmart down the street, Super Walmart, that had a greater selection of toys, believe it or not, in my opinion, than this Toys R Us did. So it really kind of lost its luster. But let's take a look at why it lost its luster. So let's take a look at some of the things that led to where Toys R Us ended up today. So 20 years ago, in 1998, Toys R Us lost their place as the #1 toy retailer in the United States. They were knocked out of that position by Walmart, which was, of course, expanding rapidly and opening up larger stores with more selection. And as people were shopping for their household items at Walmart, they could also find all the hot toys for their kids. I think Walmart got aggressive not only with price, but with exclusivity as well. So that started to put a dent into the business. And then, of course, as we rounded the turn of the century, e-commerce became a thing. And one of the mistakes I think Toys R Us did was contract with Amazon to run their entire e-commerce operation. I don't think this lasted all that long, but it was long enough for Amazon to take that partnership and learn how to sell toys online. And when the deal soured, Amazon just started selling toys themselves, and Toys R Us did not develop the expertise to sell those toys online themselves. And shareholders, I think, started getting a bit antsy here. And of course, those two pressures continued. So in 2005, Toys R Us, the public company, was acquired by a private equity group. And this was something called a leveraged buyout. And I've got a link down there below to the Financial Times where you can read more about this. And a leveraged buyout means that this private equity group bought all the shares of the company and became the owner of the company, but they saddled the company with the debt of the deal. So Toys R Us had a $5 billion essentially credit card bill here to help pay for the purchase of itself. And that $5 billion became a real issue for them over the next decade or so, because they really couldn't invest in the business when they had to keep paying down these debt payments. And they also had to pay fees to the private equity group for the management of the company. I think over the course of this ownership, they probably paid out $100 or $200 million to the private equity group for them to operate. And this is partly why these stores have really lost their luster, because they couldn't invest in anything because most of their money went to paying down debt. So in 2017, they finally just had to declare bankruptcy because they were having to pay several $100 million a year just to keep themselves from becoming insolvent. And their sales were declining as well because of all this pressure from big box, from Walmart, from Amazon, and all the other pressures that they were under. And then, of course, the debt kind of sealed the deal in 2018 for them to go into liquidation. So what's next? Well, there is a healthy, or more or less healthy, Canada business here that's part of this company. And there's also a number of profitable U.S. stores. In fact, the store that I referred to at the beginning here, the one in Waterford, Connecticut, was going to be one of the stores that would remain open during this restructuring that they were going through, or they were hoping to go through prior to declaring liquidation. And that store was profitable, and it looks like some of these profitable U.S. stores are going to get bundled with this Canada business and remain open. So I think we're going to see a lot of these stores liquidate, but there will probably be some stores left over. And probably the best analog to this might be what we saw with Radio Shack, in that Radio Shack I think is now part of some private equity group, and there are some Radio Shack stores that are remaining as real company stores, and there's other ones that are opening up as franchises under the Radio Shack brand that will sell some items that they're bringing in with Radio Shack branded items as well. So I think we're going to see this kind of model appear here, that we'll see some company-owned Toys R Us stores, and then probably some kind of franchise thing or some other arrangement where the brand will exist, but it just won't be like we remembered it. But maybe there might be a buyer that brings some passion back into this business and really tries to build it up. In some of the articles I've been reading, there's a brand, I think it's called MGA. They manufacture these LOL surprise dolls, which are my daughter's favorite things at the moment. You can look them up on YouTube to see what they're all about. And they are owed a lot of money by the Toys R Us entity here, and they're one of the people that's looking to put together a group to buy this. You might actually see some toy manufacturers buy out the chain, probably for fractions of a penny on the dollar, to maybe reinvigorate it, because this really is, Toys R Us, an important part of the toy industry, because toys are a very tactile thing. And I think people do, or especially kids, want to test out the stuff they are looking to buy first in a store versus just blindly buying it online. The biggest problem, though, with all of this is that there are a number of smaller companies that will likely also go bankrupt because they will never get their money back from Toys R Us. The secured creditors, like the banks and whoever these private equity people worked with, are going to get their money from this liquidation first. They probably won't get the whole $5 billion out of it, but they're going to get paid before all of these other smaller companies will. I think we're going to see a lot of smaller toy companies go under as a result of this.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters of the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast, Chris Allegretta, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.